So we're about to enter into the path of the Bodhisattva. And we've been going through our text and really getting all the pieces together. Last week we talked about the 5 paths. And the 5 paths are very useful in the sense of it tells you where you are on the path. So it's not 5 distinct paths, it's sort of 5 levels of pathways within our mind. It's a good guide as to where we are on a path. So we went through the path of accumulation, preparation, path of seeing, meditation, and then no more learning, then we're Buddhists. So, and the entry level point is really this idea of entering a path of renunciation, of developing that to a degree that goes beyond just this sort of intellectual aspiration of renunciation, that we have some real sense that the real suffering in my life comes from me, not out there, and that I start renouncing the delusion that I can arrange my life just so, and then I'll be happy, and my life will be meaningful. And it's just such a pervasive, very strong delusion. You know, we can talk about it all day, as we mentioned last week, and then we walk out and whoosh, here it is again, you know, what's going to make me happy? So it's something that is, in order to really enter the path, is to have a visceral understanding, an actual realization, a sense that's developed only by bringing it to mind again and again, being observant in our daily life, noticing how we get caught up in anger and attachment and aversion, and you know how we get stressed over things and we get upset, and just noticing how fleeting they are. How fleeting they are. But when we're in them, we're so caught up in them. I'm so angry. I'm so frustrated. You know, man, I'll be happy if this happens. Boy, I'm really stressed unless, you know, I really want this to, if I get this job, you know. And you can just see where that mind's just, you know, perpetuating this angst around how to engage in our lives and going from one thing to the next. And it becomes almost impossible to just simply sit and be in your own life without the waves of minds and emotion. And so if we start really bringing that to mind, we start noticing the fleeting nature, if we start noticing the hamster wheels that we get on in our lives, and how habits and desires and impulses and habits just hook us again and again, and just carry us into, just quite without any will of our own, just hooks us right into worry and concern and fear and desire. I mean, we all know what it's like to try to go to sleep at night and your mind's wound up. And you can just say, there's nothing to worry about. But I can't go to sleep, right? And so being a prisoner of that, you know, that's really, the understanding of that is what really develops renunciation, is that I don't want to be a prisoner of that anymore. That is a lot of thoughts, emotions, feelings. They're temporary mental states that come and go, and they are not who I am. And so if we get this sense of that, it drives us to look a little further at our interactions and kind of notice how I create a lot of my own mental and emotional suffering. And if I shift a few things, look at a perspective in a little more clear way, maybe some of that can clear. In that way, we start recognizing that the worldly life, the 8 worldly concerns that I've been hooked into, is really a wheel of suffering. And that's what we ultimately renounce. We renounce the delusion that this mind perpetuates around the sources of my happiness and suffering. It goes right to the root. And as Lama Yeshe likes to say, since we all want happiness, and since happiness doesn't come from ice cream, it's good to look at where it does come from. Temporary stimulus-driven pleasure comes from ice cream. But also suffering comes from ice cream. When I don't get my chunky monkey ice cream, It's pretty sad. And so getting to that level requires some sustained effort, because what happens is, we get a glimpse, and then we go out and delusion arises, and I'm chasing my desires, habits, and then that whirlwind of what will make me happy just is pervasive. I'm bringing this up because I was in California just yesterday, and a friend of mine who'd been practicing for a long time, and he was trained in a couple different traditions, been meditating a long time. He wanted to meet because even though he'd been practicing for a while, it didn't really feel like he had a path or a direction. And we can get that way in our practice, is that I'm meditating, or I'm doing this, or I'm reading that sutra, or I'm doing this thing. And what happens is I get scattered, and there's this, there's that, and then he's having all these feelings come up when he's meditating. What's that about? And what doesn't happen for a lot of people is a very clear direction. And what is a daily practice? And is my daily practice helping address my mental afflictions that prevent me from progressing on path? In other words, I want to get somewhere. And so the analogy we've used here a lot is the idea that in my practice, when I wake up in the morning, it's important to have a morning practice. I wake up in the morning, and I take a little time to bring into mind, hopefully, reality. It's nice to bring reality to mind, because if we don't do it consciously, the mind's not going to bring it up. The mind's going to bring up a whole lot of, hey, we ought to go do this. And so in the morning, to take a little time, and one of our really common practices is the 4 thoughts that turn your mind to Dharma. And which is really, I like to call it, an accurate assessment of your current situation. It's just a reminder that you right now have all of the conditions, all of the qualities available to remove your suffering. You have achieved a rare and precious human rebirth, which takes eons of lifetimes to have, and you have it. We have it. By virtue of sitting here right now, you have it. Not all humans have it. But you do, and we have it. And to remember, we have the qualities right now to transcend all of those mental afflictions. We've got the mental capacity, we've got the teachings available, we have actual time to do practice. We have a life that allows that opportunity. And this day and age, we have access to incredible teachings that, just 20 years ago, man, to try to get this kind of teachings, you wouldn't find it in English, and you wouldn't find someone in English who could explain it to you. And we can YouTube the Dalai Lama. That just blows me away. His Holiness. You can sit there, and here he is in your living room, breaking down the nature of reality. We have that. So we have this accessibility. We have this opportunity, and the reminder that we won't have it for long. The body will come and go. And so what am I going to do with this rare and precious human rebirth? And will my life get any better if I don't work on it? If I don't take, as the analogy says, the medicine, right? The medicine of our mental afflictions, the cure, the antidote, if I don't work on it. So to take a little time to really reset and understand the nature of our opportunity and the nature of reality itself, that how I engage in life, the real source of my suffering, and is the seeds I've planted, right? Anger, resentment, jealousy, the more I water that, the more suffering I'm going to have in life. The more I water kindness and compassion and wisdom, the more that can grow. And so to bring our mind to that in a practice, to really cultivate a little glimpse of what we call the interdependent nature of reality, of emptiness, and what my role is in that. And to start then making a commitment to be as mindful as possible during the day, to notice these qualities that I want to cultivate in my life and try to hold them dear. and notice when things get in the way. And then in the evening, we get a little time to review. What did I do well and what did I do not so well? I can purify what I didn't do well. And in this way, we get to make progress, but it's nice to have a path. It's nice to have a direction. And if I don't, that whole sort of taking time in the morning, I like to think of it as loading up my GPS. It's like putting the map there. Here's my direction for the day. And my mindfulness gets to be that little thing in the GPS that redirects me. Recalculating. John, you're being a jerk right now. Focus back here, A little more patience, a little more kindness. And if we load that map every day and we cultivate a mindfulness that can guide us, we get to plug in our GPS and we get to be on a path and we get to go somewhere. But if we don't have the map loaded, we don't even know where we're going, it's going to be hard to make healthy choices. And so today we're going to look at what are some of those healthy choices that will get us further into our path. This was a presentation initially of to get into the path. They call it the 5 paths. Essentially, it's really the different levels of mind, the development of mind, on a continuous path. It's where you're at. And then there's some helpful tools that we can use to help us make progress. And so we're entering now a stage where we would be entering into a Mahayana or Bodhisattva path. And I just want to read sort of the idea. So Bodhisattva path, for those who are new here, is that I'm not just here to eliminate my suffering. I'm not just here for me to be free of afflictions. I am here to help eliminate the suffering of all beings. That I'm going to use this mind stream to really help benefit all beings. And I'm going to achieve enlightenment, and I'm going to hang out and help everybody else. It's that totally selfless mind that seeks to free all beings from suffering. And that sounds like a tall order, and it is. And it is. And so we have to kind of work our way up to that a little bit and see some of the benefits in helping others. And we'll get into that in a moment. But it's also, just because it seems so far away, doesn't mean it's not possible. And that certain qualities we can develop in our daily life. I remember, I was telling my friend the other day, just the teachings I got many years ago when I first sat down at the center that I was trained in. And they were talking about, these types of things. And I just thought, boy, there's just no way I'm getting there. Like, no, I can't even get my mind close to that. It's like me hitting a rock. And I thought, maybe I'll just work on being a good human being, all right? And those guys, they get it. I'm not one of those guys. I understand. But it was good enough to try to be a better human being and to keep showing up. And what happens over time is that by being a good human being, we start really tilling the soil of our mind. We start allowing this fertilization to take place, so that years later, you're hearing that same teaching, and it's like, oh, like I know that. How did that happen? And it didn't happen because I received the teachings or thought about the teachings or debated on the teachings. It happened because I became a more ethical human being. It became, the fertilization became the conditioning of ripening, of cultivating merit, of eliminating a lot of harmful mental states and actions that frees up the spaciousness that then these teachings come and they have a place to land. Because you've created the conditions, you've tilled the soil, and that's a gradual thing. And then things that seem so unobtainable to me before, are just habit now. There's still a lot that seem very unattainable, but some of those things that I was with some friends. We've been practicing together for 16 years, And we just remember those days. And boy, they just went through a teaching where that they had gotten many years ago, and this time they actually felt like they understood some of it. Right? And it's like, how did that happen? It happened through a consistent, steady cultivation of merit and wisdom along the way. So the idea that can we hold, can we acquire, or is it even our nature to have a mind that seeks to eliminate the suffering of all beings as your primary motivation? And I would say that there are examples in our lives we can look to, and for me, I find that valuable. I find it's helpful to see teachers or beings that have done this. So for me, it's inspiring. You know, I would say the three above my head were like that, and I got to meet them in real life and see them day to day and see how, well, His Holiness I only got to see a couple of times, but I got to live with, Latte Rinpoche on this side and with Geshe Gelsen over there. And I never saw anything but a complete, total acceptance and kindness of every single being they came in contact with, constantly. It was really phenomenal to see, experience. So it's doable, and I know that I'm better than I was. I'm not there. Far, far, far from it. But the soil is better. And so if we do a daily practice, what we get to do is we get to really create the conditions that these teachings sink in, and these states of mind and compassion and kindness that we could never imagine gets to be more of a habit. It's where we start to live most of the time. And when we're there most of the time, you know what's not there most of the time? Anger, resentment, jealousy, frustration. It's really nice. These are mental afflictions. They don't have space to grow. You know, the weeds of our garden don't grow there because the fertilizer is so sweet. And so this becomes we're entering into this bodhisattva path, and the idea then is these 6 perfections, and the first 5 are really tilling the soil, and we imbue it all with the 6th. And but I wanted to read just quickly the idea of a bodhisattva vow. So when we are on a path and we say, this is the path I want to get on, this wants to be my inspiration, and we're ready to take something like a bodhisattva vow and really nurture that soil. This is this extraordinary attitude of mind of a bodhisattva. And so here's the thoughts that come. May I be a guard for those who are protectorless, a guide for those whose journey on the road, a guide for those who journey on the road. For those who wish to go across the water, may I be a boat, a raft, a bridge. May I be an isle for those who yearn for landfall, and a lamp for those who long for light. For those who need a resting place, a bed. For those who need a servant, may I be a slave. May I be the wishing jewel, the vase of plenty, a word of power and the supreme remedy. May I be the trees of miracles, and for every being, the abundant cow. Like the great earth and the other elements, enduring as the sky itself endures, for the boundless multitude of living beings, may I be the ground and vessel of their life. Thus, for every single thing that lives, in number like the boundless reaches of the sky, may I be their substance and nourishment until they pass beyond the bounds of suffering. And this becomes a way of being that we can water over time. It's quite literally the antidote to our self-cherishing attitude that creates suffering in our life. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama likes to say it's another word for being wisely selfish. And, it's not limited to Buddhism. You have a prayer of, St. Francis of Assisi, who's very similar, right? These are immeasurable states of mind, of attitudes that transcend our normal grasping of self that really creates the problems. And we'll find it in many great saints and in other traditions as well. And here the Bodhisattva path means I'm going to stick around till everybody is free and cultivate that mind. So in the monastery, I would have this opportunity to go see some of these incredible old lamas. And they were that humble. I mean, they were this living embodiment. You would go and, I'd go visit one of the greatest lamas of our monastery, which is one of the oldest in the lineage, which is, this renowned place. And I'd go to his house, and he's in an old little place with rackety holes in the walls. He's wearing a tank top with holes in it. He's got his robes. It's 103 degrees. And he's just sitting in his place and making sure us Westerners are comfortable. Here, come down. So, can we get you tea? Can we? And you're sitting there, and he is like that servant in a sense, and yet he's this incredible being. I looked at his wallet. He's got like the keys to the state of, I think it was Alabama at some point, that the governor gave him, just tacked on this old wall, and stuff, because he'd come on a tour once and given teachings. And just that heart of service, and to see that these great masters have that level of mind to where they're going to bend down and make sure you're okay. Stumbled on another one that I wanted to see, and he'd been sleeping, and he's older and in a nap, and he just jumps up, and then he just sits down, and he makes sure that he answers every question we have, and make sure that we're okay, and make sure here's what you really, I think is most valuable to you, and will give that Dharma in such an incredible way. And so when you see this, what you're seeing is the first of these 6 perfections, in a sense. Generosity. A mind of generosity. A mind that is there to give. A mind that is concerned with others. And so as we enter in the 6 perfections, this first one, this idea of generosity, I'll read the quote they have. The perfection of generosity, the suffering of guarding what we have, the pain of losing it all. And, isn't that, when you think about when we grasp to what we have, how much suffering's there, and the thought of losing it, and keeping score, and what's mine, and what's yours, and what do I have, and what could I give, and you can just recognize that in itself becomes this really painful place to be. And with generosity, there's this idea of spaciousness. It's just a straightforward antidote to clinging and attachment, which is really where our suffering resides. In Buddhism, we talk about 3 types of generosity. So it's not limited to, offering money or things. Number 1 is the generosity of offering Dharma, so that when anyone asks at any time if you can be of help on their way. And Dharma not limited to a Buddha Dharma, but what can we help someone in ways that can help them mentally and emotionally? What can eliminate mental suffering in that sense? And what can we do there? There's the generosity of giving protection to make sure people are safe. And then there's the actual sort of material generosity. And so this idea of generosity encompasses giving of my time, giving of my attention, giving of whether it be some things that I have, but the idea of really how can I be helpful? How can I be helpful? And that just becomes a primary way of operating. What can I help you? How can I help you with? What can I offer to be of assistance? Is it some time? Is it some resources? What can I do? And I think I may have mentioned it here last week. Could have been. But Kuno Rinpoche, this old, incredible Lama, someone His Holiness the Dalai Lama would receive compassion teachings on. At one point, he was just at a little one-room place outside of Bodh Gaya. Again, sweltering heat, old monk, no resources really. And Westerners would pilgrimage to see him because he was like a living bodhisattva. This is incredible being. And Westerners would go, and he would give them his time. He would meet with them. He would offer the tea. And then he would offer them a few rupees. Oh, here, take some rupees. He didn't have any money, and he's offering his rupees to these Westerners. That's that kind of mind of generosity that exists. And so really, it's not just this fancy words or highfalutin things. There's beings that we can have a spaciousness. And if we really translate it to the idea of how can I be helpful, you've already eliminated a lot of suffering in life. Because a lot of our suffering is what's in it for me. When someone comes in that door, do I like them, don't like them? Are they going to be a pain in the butt? Are they going to offer me something? Are they, there's this whole thing going on. If every being that came in the door, we thought, how can I be helpful? What a different attitude we'd have there. How can I be helpful? There's a spaciousness of mind that says, what can I do to help? And here in the Bodhisattva path, you're going to see the most supreme view of it. So we got to remember that here in a Western view, we're not there yet. Okay, so there's a great story here, because we need to work up to this, and we need to do it in a very practical way. Because some people get extreme and they give up everything, and then they can't eat and they can't take care of themselves. So we're not suggesting that. We're suggesting. Geshe Gelsen up here would always say, even here, like donations for our center, at his center, he would always say, make sure your needs are met and then offer. But don't offer until your needs are met, because if you don't have your needs met, you're not going to be helpful for long. So it's not that we get all caught up and give everything away. It's that we have a mind of what's helpful, and in a sustainable way. So my needs are met. I have more than I need. How can I help? That's just a material way, but time, energy, resources, that we make sure that we live a balanced, healthy, simple lifestyle to where we can be helpful. And that we need to sort of develop that. There's these ways of doing this. So here's a story which illustrates how even the least generous person can make progress in such a practice. One day, an extremely wealthy man came to see the Buddha. He was so miserly that he couldn't bring himself to give away even the smallest thing. The Buddha told the man to think of his right hand as himself and his left hand as another person, and to pass small objects from one hand to another. So he could practice giving, but visualizing. Once the man was able to do this easily, the Buddha then instructed him to offer small presents to his own family, the people he cared for. So starting small and then working his way up. When the man could do this, he was then told to give things to his neighbors and friends, and eventually he was able to give away things without hesitation, and he became renowned for his great generosity. And so a story like that, what's important in this path is that we understand that we're where we're at, and we need to learn and we need to cultivate and till our soil. We don't go from point A to point Z. right? And that's a problem because people want to do that. Oh, I want to be the most compassionate person in the world, and then I'm going to fail. I'm going to start being nice to some people I like, and then I'm going to try to be a little nice to some people I don't know very well, and I'm going to work up to the people I don't like. But if we just jump to Z, we're not going to get very far, and we're going to fail in the futility of it. And so as we engage in this idea of generosity, I think a really good starting place, and it's worked for me in my life, was the idea of how can I be helpful? Because we can be helpful to even people we don't like, and to be helpful in skillful ways. So when we think about this idea of generosity, generosity is the antidote to attachment and aversion, this clinging that creates all that suffering. And so it's this real sweet spaciousness that we can develop, and starting where we're at. How can I be helpful? Christmas time is a good time to be helpful. There's a lot of stressed out people. Have you noticed that? Some people are a little stressed out right now. And a lot of people have a lot of struggles right now around the idea of how it all ought to be. Our family should all come together, and it ought to be this magical time, and we carry this stuff, and somehow we think that this year Uncle Ernie's just not going to be Uncle Ernie, I don't know why, but every year we're hoping, and we forget that, it's still just Sunday, right? It'll be Sunday. And, but we can bring a spirit of generosity to the day, if that's the day we celebrate. And, but whatever day that we have, and when we see others struggling with that, I mean, this is such a great time to practice generosity, not just because of the season in the sense of that, but in the sense that you see so many people struggling right now. People shopping and trying to get the right thing, or agonizing over things, and how to make everything just so, that we can be very generous with our time and energy and helpfulness with them. Can we be the person at gatherings that can be a little more helpful, offer to do the dishes, be a little more engaged in that person that's not getting, who's not very comfortable. Things that we can do. So if we really look at it another way, this is the wisely selfish aspect, is that when I'm out of myself and helping others, I'm not going to suffer from all of those self-afflicted resentments, jealousies, and frustrations, right? And the real common thing is that the more I think about me, the more mental and emotional suffering I'll have. And it's just so universally true, and you can check it easily, One of the practices they have is just start paying attention to yourself, even if you're sitting in a chair. And you'll start notice that you get uncomfortable. Then you start squirming. And then, and that. But if I'm not focused on me and I'm like watching something or engaged in a conversation, that same chair is not uncomfortable at all. I don't even notice that I'm sitting there. But as soon as I put the spotlight on me, and then, oh man, my leg's a little cramped, this and that, I start stretching, and how long are we going to wait? There's just this whole thing. But when I'm not on me, and I'm focused on you, or I'm engaged in something that's fascinating, now this chair is totally fine. But if somebody tells me to sit and be quiet for a minute and focus on me, this becomes torture. It just became torture. And so this idea of generosity is also this incredible opportunity to take the focus off of feeding my mental afflictions and have the opportunity to cultivate a spaciousness that fertilizes the ground, that gets me out of myself, and allows me to really till some soil. So the next, they have verses in each one. So generosity. And also, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to just say something as we go. That way we don't have to wait till the end. It could be a dialogue. So there's three kinds of generosity, right? Dharma, protection. and the sort of material stuff that we offer. One other thing I want to say on generosity is that we can model it and we can help others with it. You know, today, you know, there's lots of these little things that people do, you know, that they sort of pay it forward. And so we can be the cause for other people's generosity. And so those little things that happen, you know, you'll hear about them on the news sometimes, where someone bought the meal for the next person, and like then that person bought a meal for, and it would go on for 8 hours, you know, like meal after meal or things after things, where little anonymous things that we can do. By being an example of that generosity, you can plant the seeds for other people's generosity and be able to offer that. So there's lots of little things each day, if we kind of look at things, that we can kind of do as a model. I have a charity that I like to, you know, sometimes give other kids in our family an opportunity to give, where they get to select a particular family that has a particular need. And so the kids then get to look at the needs that other people have that we don't. And they learn more, and then they get to get a gift. So when we think about generosity, there's also ways that we can model it. And that's being generous to others that can ripen their mind. So being helpful is, for me, I think, a good starting point. But the problem is we don't want to be Mr. Generosity, right? See how generous I am? Look how much money I'm putting in there. You know, let me, you know. So, because that becomes a mental affliction. You know, it's the idea that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with modeling it where people see it with the intention of spreading generosity, but when I spread it so people notice my generosity for my own self-esteem, then it becomes a problem, if that makes sense. Yeah. We don't need our name on the building. Yeah. Yeah, one story. I always have these little things pop up. So this is, yeah, videotape. I'll probably get away with it. No, I'm not going to go there.
Too late.
Yeah. I'll just, yeah, it was a good story. Geshe Gelsen, I'll just say the end part of it was there became a situation where His Holiness the Dalai Lama, in front of, you know, throngs of monks and nuns in India, and these incredible teachings that he was giving, he was really not happy with the organizers around how they used the funds. And my teacher, Geshe Gelsen, he was sitting there, and Geshe Gelsen's like super humble, the lowest of all, like, you know, just on his own, he built a school for the blind Indian children in India. He, you know, all the money that was donated to him, he built, you know, things for people that didn't have things. He gave it away constantly. You couldn't go see him without leaving with stuff that people, you know, and in India, his charities were just phenomenal. All that stuff went, and he built these schools, and this one school that he went to that was just a dirt floor became the school for all the blind children from the whole state that would go there, and did the teachers and so forth. So, you know, that's who he was, but it was all anonymous, like he was, you know. So he's sitting there, and His Holiness is there, and there's thousands of monks and nuns, and His Holiness looks at, why can't you be like Geshe Gelsen? He could have died, you know, like, no. And just put him on the spot and said, here's someone who works tirelessly, who could, you know, and lives this humble life, and who's done all these monasteries and all that, you know. Here's a model for you. And he's, oh my God, you know, because he doesn't want to be noticed and to be put on as we'd say, put on blast like that in front of everybody. You can just see them. But these examples are there, and we see it in other people. We admire it in other people. But when I was with him, like I say, when we go to India, we would spend half the time there going to give charity to these places, make those offerings. That's just what he did. In his temple, it was hard to even find where the donation boxes were. They were always underneath a bunch of stuff. And yet everything was paid for. His temple was totally covered. And when he passed on, all the funds that were left, he had it all laid out to go to this nunnery or this thing or that charity. It was all divvied up. And he just lived a pretty simple life. He was in his room doing his practice and teaching really literally till the day he died. Incredible generosity. So the second one is this perfection of ethics. Morality is like the earth. It supports everything, animate and inanimate. It is the foundation of all positive qualities. So this is what we were talking about at the start. This is talking about tilling the soil. This is the ground. The ground is virtuous mental and active states. And so last week I know that we went through the 10 non-virtues, right? Because Jordan asked about that, didn't you? Yeah. Okay, good. I was here. I'm remembering that. So of the 84,000 types of potential afflictions, there's the top 10 list. And so there's the 10 virtuous activities, which are their opposites. And the idea, quite literally is that there's a lot of harmful things that we can avoid doing. And if we avoid doing that, that in itself is going to help till the soil. And then if I start really doing the virtuous activities, I'm going to really start watering and nurturing the conditions that ripen my mind. And if we understand how virtuous and non-virtuous activities work in our life, what we really will start to see is that all of our mental emotional suffering comes from me. There's no other way it can be. And so the analogy that we've covered in the last couple of times is that there's causes and there's conditions. Causes, conditions. So there's the seed. Seed would be a cause. Causes are always of the same stuff, right? So a seed becomes a tree. The seed is the cause for a tree, right? So we've covered that. It's the same stuff. Then the tree fades and then more seeds. That's the stuff of a tree. No conditions, no soil, water, sun, no tree. Those are conditions that ripen the seed. And if we kind of understand this, then we start to see how karma works. We start to see how ethical behavior and unethical behavior, I like to think of as wholesome, unwholesome activities or virtuous, non-virtuous seeds that we plant become the cause for my suffering. And the conditions, give rise to those seeds. The cause for me to have any pleasurable or unpleasurable experience is always a seed I've planted. There's no other way for that to be, because pleasurable, unpleasurable, anger, resentment, jealousy, all those are mental states. They're all within the mind. And so the causes are always within the mind, in this mind stream that goes. So I'm the one planting those seeds. The conditions are variable, So the way that works is, if I'm angry at someone, I get angry at someone, I usually think they're the cause of my anger. But that's not really the deal. They're the condition that gave rise to my anger. My anger is a mental state. My anger is here, not there. And I planted the seeds, and I've tilled the soil for me to have insecurity and anger and resentment. But that's something I've planted and I've nurtured. And the people that I experience can give rise to that or not, creating a condition. But if there's no seeds, it doesn't matter what the conditions are. Anger's not going to rise. So if we start to understand this, we can start noticing I can plant some other, get some other crops going here, right? You know, I mean, I'm looking for Brussels sprouts personally. I love them. So, and I can stop, you know, planting these ones that are just so damaging. And it's a testable, verifiable thing over time. But you start noticing then that, from a Buddhist view, like if we find someone interesting or likable or not likable or jerk or an idiot or all that, you notice that one person who made me angry, well, that same person on another day can make me happy. What's different? You know, what's different? My mind's different. And my perspective's different. And so the pleasurable experience, you know, the food I like, the things I experience, how I experience it is always a result of the karma I've created. It's the lens through which I experience everything. So if I start changing that, I start changing my experience of everything. If we understand this, then we start realizing that if I get mad at somebody, okay, that karma is ripened. I'm mad. It's already ripened. It's there. It's resultant. It's here. But how I respond to my anger is either going to plant more seeds of further anger for more future anger, or it's going to be the opportunity to cultivate something very different. That when I'm angry, I don't respond or react in a way that's unhealthy. That I see that anger is arising, and instead I go to what's the most helpful thing to do here for myself and others. And now I'm planting a different seed. And every moment of my life, I get the opportunity to plant seeds. This karma machine is every movement of the mind. It's just constantly planting seeds. And so the more I engage in resentment and anger and self-justice and all that stuff, I just keep tilling that soil. And so those things continue. But if I start recognizing that pattern and I go, I am angry now. What's the healthiest thing to do about this? How can I come from a place that would be skillful and meaningful? Rather than tell somebody off and then tell your friend about it and tell them how you got that right. And then, you know, now I just watered the seed to be angry again in the future. That I actually, you know, made it more valid to be angry in the future because I got a cosigner. And so when we look at ethics, we've got to understand that that's what's happening. The idea of ethics is really about wholesome and unwholesome activity. And the definition of wholesome and unwholesome is this will lead to a pleasurable result, wholesome activity. This will lead to an unpleasant result, unwholesome. It's not rocket science. It's just very straight. And if you want to know, it's funny, there's another, not in this text, but another text. I would say many people go and have divinations done, and they go to high lamas and they want to know about their past lives or their future. If you want to know how you were in your past life, look at your life today. Because it was created by how you live, how much suffering, how much. If you want to know about your future, look at how you're living today. Because that's going to create the future. It's just not rocket science, and we don't need great divinations around that. The source of all of my mental anguish and suffering, and I'm talking about mental, I'm not talking about you get hit by a car. There's a lot of karma around that. It's the actual perception and mental and emotional suffering of how we experience that accident. Is always us. You know, that's what we planted. And the beauty is that we actually can change all of this by consciously attending to and watering the seeds that give rise to these more virtuous states. And then this becomes the soil, and then these teachings just ripen. I mean, when I first started going to Dharma classes, the analogy of me receiving a teaching, I remember being in a teaching by His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Nagarjuna. It was like pouring the most radiant nectar of wisdom and knowledge on a rock, you know? I mean, I was just trying to stay awake, you know? And that, I mean, it was, oh, God, that hurts. But I stayed awake, and I'll tell you what, half the audience did not. So I I had to get like really strong peppermint things to keep me going, trying to get my mind even close to wrapped around anything. But that's, that's what happens. But over time, as we condition ourselves, as we, cultivate and start to understand how things work a little bit, and we stop watering that self-cherishing attitude and the things that really build up that armor of karma and klesha, that drifts away, and we create the spaciousness of the ground. Then we receive a teaching, and it's like little bits of it sink in now, So now it's probably just pouring on an old covered up pot, whereas before it was a rock, Maybe one day it'll be a nice fertile soil. It could happen. But these things have more space then. So this we've got the trajectory, and now this is sort of the tools that we cultivate, this helpfulness, and then we stop engaging in these harmful activities that ultimately are harming us. When I'm yelling at someone out of anger, I'm going to pay the price. And resentment? Come on. Really? You know the analogy that's used so commonly? It's like holding on to a hot coal, hoping somebody else will get burned. I'm resentment at somebody who's not even knowing I'm thinking about them. What am I doing? And then I rationalize my anger. Who's suffering when I'm angry? I am. And what am I watering when I'm angry? And who is it that's angry anyway? And what am I angry at? I'll guarantee you what I'm angry at doesn't exist. And if you kind of get that, it's like, really? I'm damaging myself for something that's not even based in reality. It's just so phenomenally insane. And yet we do it, right? Because somebody did this one thing, so they are this jerk or this thing or that, whatever sliver of a thing they are, or they did this. And I actually believe that's who they are, what they are. And there's some, like they couldn't have done anything nice in their life or done other things. Or if I knew them on a different day, or if I knew that they just lost their brother, or, just all those things that actually exist about this person. I focus on one thing, and I actually believe it to be true and capture their whole essence. And I'll carry that resentment for years. It's a phenomenal delusion. And then I suffer, not them. So you can see how these 6 perfections then are really, these paramitas are perfecting, they're leading us to a perfected state of mind by really addressing the cause of our suffering. They're the antidotes to all of the causes of our suffering. The attachment and the aversion, we get generosity. Ethics, we just stop mucking up our own life is really what happens. What a gift to just stop mucking up my own life. I deserve to not hurt myself, really. And does anybody like being angry? I mean, is that a good place to be? No. Does it arise? Yeah. But it's what I do with it when it arises. I've already created. Once it arises, guess what? It's ripened. It's gone. I don't need to have that anymore. But if I grab onto it, own it, identify with it, react to it, I'm going to have a lot more. So these first 2 are just leading the way. You can see how they just prepare. Apparently we're going to get to some of the other ones next week. The perfections are really this, the idea is really a bodhisattva path of this incredible mind of altruism that just cuts through. It just cuts through so much of a cause of our suffering. So we want to imbue our practice with it. So we have generosity, ethics, patience. So you'll be patient till next week. We'll get to that. Joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom. Let us dedicate the merit and wisdom that we've accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes, both individually and collectively. We dedicate this for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be free of suffering and find lasting happiness. And may we be able to use the merit and wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lives, to purify our own minds, to cultivate the path to enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and thank you online for coming. And as usual, let's put into practice these bits of wisdom that help us along the way. So try to stay out of trouble is the other way of putting that. Okay, be well.